Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'd like to talk about Season 1 of House of the Dragon, which just finished airing a few days ago. Now, before I do that, I do think it's important for me to explain sort of my relationship to the source material, just to give you all a little bit of context as to like where my mindset was at going into this show. I have never read and honestly don't plan on reading any of the books that this show was based off of or that Game of Thrones was based off of. I thought of reading A Song of Ice and Fire a few years back, but ultimately decided just that I didn't want to. I didn't have the time to, and I didn't read Fire and Blood, which was the kind of basis for this show. Speaking of Game of Thrones, for the first couple seasons of that show, I did not have, or my family did not have HBO, so I had no way to watch it. I was kept pretty spoiler free for those first 3 seasons. Now, what ended up happening was during my junior year of college, Xfinity, which was our cable provider at the time, did a watch-a-thon week where basically everyone who didn't have those premium cable channels like HBO and Showtime, you got all of those for free for 1 week, with the goal of like getting you to essentially subscribe to it permanently. And I had a roommate who was really into Game of Thrones, and he convinced me to watch it. And this was right before season 4 was about to come out. So I spent a whole week straight of basically just watching seasons 1 through 3 of Game of Thrones. And then my friend, my roommate who had HBO, he allowed me to use it while season 4 came out. And so basically from season 4 onwards, I watched as the episodes were released. Like a year later, I got my own HBO subscription, and ever since then, I watched seasons 4 through 8 of Game of Thrones. And I feel like my opinions on Game of Thrones pretty much echo what the general public has to say. It's a fantastic show. Seasons 1 through 6 roughly are some of the best seasons of television that have ever been made. Season 8 was a bit of a letdown, I'm not gonna lie. But even then, I think season 8 compared to like the average TV show quality nowadays, or at least back then anyways, was still quite good. So I enjoyed Game of Thrones. I wouldn't say I'm like a nerd, but I really enjoyed the show. It ended on somewhat of a disappointment though for me, I would say. All of that is to say, I wasn't super hyped for this show. I wasn't like not excited for it, but I wasn't like really looking forward to it. I honestly kind of forgot about that it was coming out. For a while, I think they released a trailer for it way like at the beginning of the year, like maybe right before summer started. And then I honestly forgot it was coming out until like the day before it came out. So I wasn't like not excited for it, but I wasn't super hyped about it, to say the least. And I will say that I quite enjoyed the show. Some strengths of the show for me include the acting and the casting. I think the performances in this show are some of the best that are currently on TV today. I think Paddy Considine was fantastic. I'd never heard of him before, and I think him as the king is a legit Emmy contender. Like I think he did great, especially his like physical acting. With what happens with his character throughout the show, I think he did really well. So the acting and the casting, which they had to get correct, because this show does cover a span of 19 years. And so what happens, and this is, I guess, maybe a light spoiler, I don't know. But what happens is some of the younger characters age up through the show. And so there are a couple different kind of periods in the show where the actors for the younger characters change. And so they really had to make sure that they kept things consistent. Like you had to be convinced that you were watching the same character even though they were different actors, and I thought they did a really good job with that. I will say that overall the show felt maybe a little bit slow. Like when I think back to the stuff that would happen in each episode, a lot of the stuff that was like character development that came from dialogue, or like there wasn't a whole lot of action, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. Like a lot of the development was based on like characters politicking and trying to politically maneuver themselves into positions where they can get what they want, which was a really cool aspect of the show. I felt like there was a lot of like Game of Thrones-ing going on in House of the Dragon, where people were trying to get what they want through talking and through political means and through alliances, rather than like just killing whoever. Not to say that there weren't some really cool action sequences in the show. I think essentially the last scene of the show was a really awesome scene involving some dragons, which were used quite sparingly in the show, which I get why they had to do that. Like all the dragons are CGI, which is expensive nowadays, especially if you want it to look good, especially if you want it to look good on TV, which is a whole different thing. So I get why they really couldn't use dragons all that much, but with the show being called House of the Dragon, I did honestly expect dragons to feature a little bit more. However, the amount that they were used, when they were used, was worth it. I've kept this review kind of vague. I don't have like a whole lot to say about the show other than that I had those tiny issues. It was a little bit slow, could have used more dragons, but I enjoyed it overall. Like, it was a good show. I don't feel like I wasted 10 weeks of my life. I feel like this was a really good first season of a show that I'm interested to see where it goes. Like I said, I have no idea like where the story goes from here. I know that there are books that kind of outline where the story goes, but I haven't read those and I don't plan to, so I am intrigued to see where they go in future seasons. Supposedly they're doing up to 4. It's definitely already getting a second season, and the way that this one sets things up, I do anticipate a little bit more action. I think there will be a little bit more action in the second season and the seasons to follow, but I'm ultimately really looking forward to watching this show when the second season eventually comes out. All right, so House of the Dragon Season 1. Did you watch it? If so, did you like it? Did you not like it? If you'd like to have a conversation with me in the comments down below, I will see you there. Otherwise, be sure to stay tuned to the channel for more videos.